Welcome to No More and Guess Less with Teresa. Hey, we are on Vodcast 2 already, and we finally have to arrive at the elusive concept of political communication. We want to know who the players are, we want to know what the messages are, we want to know how to define it, and we will do so in this podcast. Woo! Yes, I have chosen this picture of Helen Zille and Jacob Zuma in better days, when they actually had a little dance together. But we're not talking about dancing. However, political language could actually also be symbolic in the non-verbal sense. But let's start off with what politics is all about. And it is about the management of a state by professional politicians and political institutions. So your government is not the only institution that actually governs or that is engaged in politics. How do you practice politics? Of course, through communication, or better to say, through language. Woo! But as I've already foreshadowed, language does not have to be verbal all the time. Yes, your politicians, especially the one pictured here on the left, do use a lot of words, sometimes very nonsensical words and very filler-like words in order to bring a message across, but you can also communicate non-verbally. Remember, we've just talked about non-verbal communication, and your test actually subsumes a question about Cyril Ramaphosa standing on a podium and giving a speech. And you were supposed to discuss the objectives and what they communicate in this particular picture. So verbal and non-verbal symbols need to be considered when we're talking about language in politics. Also, what you have to consider a lot is your audience. We're going straight back to philosophical rhetoric. The Greeks were the first ones to point out, your audience is important. We need to keep the audience in mind. And that's exactly what we have to do. Look at your recipients and make sure that you are talking in a language, verbally or non-verbally, that they actually understand and that they get persuaded by. In order to persuade them, you got to design your messages, okay? So all the tactics that we've discussed should be applied. Appeal to the needs, get some evidence going, be rational, and also non-verbally be persuasive as well. Where do we see these designed and controlled messages? Of course, in your political speeches, in your campaigns, in your debates. And as you know, even though you might not be a very political human being, that they're using emotional arguments, pathos as we called it, in order to arouse the audience's fancy, in order to get the audience going, and in order to, of course, persuade you. What else? A language of political persuasion aims to guide recipients' attitudes on a political issue or push them to act. We're going straight back to our definition of persuasion. Remember, it worked on two levels, on a cognitive level as well as on a behavioral level. And this is what politicians ultimately aim toward. They aim toward making you act in a certain way, putting your cross right next to their names on the ballot sheet. Woo! When we are looking at a definition of political communication, we can maybe consult McNair. McNair actually points out that there are three very important players in the realm of political communication. We have our political organizations, we have the media, and we have our citizens. All of them send messages in the political sphere. And all of them, if the messages concern everyday life and governance and rules and regulations, engage in political communication. The thing is that political organizations very rarely interact with citizens directly. It does happen, but most of the time we have to go via the media in order to find out about our governments, about our parties. But don't always think of political organizations as just your government or parties. No, pressure groups and activist groups are also political organizations. Terrorists are organized into political groupings. I know this sounds ludicrous, but yes, they have a huge impact in some instances and in some countries on what is happening in these countries and how these countries are ruled. So coming back to McNair's definition, he says, that political communication subsumes all forms of communication that politicians as well as political actors use in order to achieve a specific political objective. These messages can be addressed to non-politicians, voters, as well as news makers or media workers. The messages usually come in the form of news reports, editorials, and other forms of media discussions. I do not like McNair's definition very much. I don't know why I always think I need to give my opinion on things, but here it is. I do believe that McNair selects a particular type of political communication and he completely neglects the political communication that happens outside of the media, for example, rallies. And he also completely neglects the time when the citizens actually participate in the democratic decision making, maybe through committees or maybe through them marching and protesting for a particular cause. All of that is political as well, but not subsumed under McNair's political communication definition. As always, I would like to encourage you to grab the bull by the horns, grab the definition bull by the horns, and actually come up with your own stuff. You do not have to regurgitate other people's insights because they are coming from a certain angle. They are scoping their definitions. And maybe for our purposes, we should rescope and reset the limits of that definition to include rallies, to include citizens who engage in political communication. Woo! I hope you will try to come up with your own definition because it also puts you in good stead for your third year course to do with research. I'll see you for the next one.